Even if you don't live in Georgia, I'm sure you've seen talk on social media about Georgia's new voting bill. It's been heavily debated online, especially after Major League Baseball pulled the All-Star game from Georgia as a response. Essentially, while some election officials say that the Republican-led measure has some benefits, others, like President Joe Biden, argue that it will make voting more difficult, especially for people of color. One piece of the bill that seemed to stir up the most controversy was a provision that bans giving away water or food to voters within a certain distance of polling sites. But take a look at this PBS NewsHour interview I found on YouTube, where Republican election official Gabriel Sterling said that this is actually also the case in Biden's home state of Delaware.
You know what's making headlines, of course, is this ban on handing out food and water at the polls. I understand you've made the argument that in the last election, there may have been some activists who used giving out water as an excuse to talk to voters. First, do we know that that happened? And second, if so, why not just enforce the campaign ban? Why eliminate giving out food and water?
Well, the main thing is it's been used as a workaround to get around that law. And the irony of this is we looked it up. This is actually the law in the president's home state of Delaware right now. So this is not some new thing that's been brought out. This is pretty standard across the country.
Hey guys, it's Isaac and welcome back to Is This Legit? A series where we show you how to debunk viral claims. So, does Delaware also have a food and water ban at polling sites like Georgia? Time to find out, is this legit? So, being a teen fact checker and all, this should come as no surprise. I'm really into watching the news. I tune into the PBS NewsHour regularly. So, when I heard this claim, I was immediately curious if it was true. But even if you aren't a news nerd, stories like this one are important to keep tabs on. Gen Z will eventually make up a huge voting bloc, and it's important to know how to get accurate information now, especially about things that could impact you in the future. Now, let's get into the fact check. First, some background information on the bill. I did a series of keyword searches, and luckily, since this is a pretty confusing topic, plenty of reputable news organizations have put together some great explainer articles that I'll link below in the description. According to this article I found from NPR, Republican state lawmakers in Georgia have recently introduced some bills that would increase barriers to voting for some people. And NPR said that this legislation was largely inspired by the false claims made by former President Donald Trump, who claimed that there was widespread voter fraud during the 2020 election. Now, tons of fact-checking organizations have debunked this claim, and Georgia election officials, including Gabriel Sterling, have repeatedly said that Georgia did not experience any widespread fraud. But this has some Democrats wondering, well then, why introduce new voting measures at all? Opening more tabs, I found these explainers from the BBC and USA Today. Now, the bill comes with a bunch of provisions, but here are some big takeaways. Democrats are critical of the reform because it reduces the number of drop boxes and limits the hours they are available, shortens the timeline for requesting and returning ballots, makes it so mail-in voters will have to provide one form of ID, like a driver's license or a social security number, which Democrats say disproportionately affects Black Americans and people of color. And it makes it easier for state officials to remove local election officials and appoint their own chair of the board. But Republicans argue that while there will be fewer boxes, the law actually makes drop boxes a permanent feature since they were only used in 2020 because of the pandemic. That requiring an ID will make voting more secure, and that the law actually expands access to voting since it expands early voting for primaries and general elections, requiring 2 Saturdays. And now, to the main issue of water. According to the article that I found from the BBC, under this new reform, while poll workers are still allowed to give away water, other people will have to follow new restrictions. According to the article, the law makes it an offense to give away food or water within 150 feet of a polling place or within 25 feet of any voter in line. Democrats say that this will again affect Black voters, mainly because long waits are common in areas with larger Black populations due to fewer polling stations. But Republicans say that this will limit possible interference before people can cast their vote. But the question remains, is this also the law in Biden's state of Delaware as well? I decided to do another keyword search, and I used words like Gabriel Sterling, Georgia versus Delaware voting laws, water, and food. And one result that came up was this fact check from the Washington Post. According to the article, Delaware does not explicitly prohibit food or water. However, Delaware does prohibit giving gifts of any value to voters. The Washington Post article also mentions that it's actually just New York and Montana that have rules when it comes to food and water, not Delaware. The Washington Post included a link to the election law in Delaware, so I clicked on that. This is a media literacy skill called reading upstream. It's basically when you head directly to the primary sources included in the articles so you can read the facts for yourself. Heading to primary sources is a for sure way to get the unfiltered facts. and looking through the actual law, I couldn't find any mention of food or drink. Turning back to my keyword search results, I also found this fact check from Snopes. Like the Washington Post, Snopes reported that only Montana and New York have similar bans when it comes to food and water, though they wrote that these bans are actually less restrictive than Georgia's. They looked at voting laws state by state and wrote that these types of food and water bans are very rare, adding that Sterling's claim was way off base. And now, time for our rating. We'll rate this statement from Sterling as mostly not legit. While Delaware does prohibit gifts to voters, it's not true to say that Georgia's ban on food and water is the same law that's in place in Delaware, since Delaware's laws don't even mention food or water. But before you go, I want to leave you with 2 bonus media literacy tips. First, question how a post makes you feel. Posts that make us feel outraged, scared, or any sort of intense emotional reaction are usually missing a lot of context. It might even be designed to spark that kind of emotion. Bad actors can use emotions to manipulate how you feel about something like new voting laws. So, it's always a good idea to take a look at who is sharing the post and see if there is a bias. And speaking of bias, another tool that can be helpful when digesting info from a lot of sources is a media bias chart, like these ones from Adfontes Media and AllSides.com. Now, you shouldn't make your final judgment on an organization based solely on one of these charts, but they can be a good resource when you're reading news from a source you're not as familiar with. This also can help you diversify your own news sources. MediaWise is an article about how to best use these charts that I linked in the description. Well, thanks for watching, and be sure to keep an eye out for information that needs more context, just like this. And be sure to let us know about anything you'd like us to fact check by using the hashtag #IsThisLegit. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Don't compromise, be media wise.